亲爱的听众朋友们，大家下午好！华美之声电台的社区热线节目又与大家见面了，我是节目主持人袁雨晨。今天华美之声电台节目组来到了芝加哥唐人街图书馆，采访芝加哥第25区区长苏礼士先生 Alderman Mr. Solis。大家可能知道，苏礼士区长所在的第25区包括了皮尔森、小意大利和唐人街，共有近6万名居民，其中大约15%左右是咱们中国侨胞和同胞们。苏礼士区长长期以来一直致力于第25区的建设和发展，对中国侨胞们非常友好，有华府之友之称，也深为大多数中国同胞的支持，连任7届。在今天半个小时的采访中，苏礼士区长就第25区，特别是中国城的经济发展、投资环境、社区安全等方面，与华美之声电台进行了全面的对话。采访结束之后，我们又与苏礼士区长有了一些富有成果的交谈。他也邀请电台组对他进行每月1次的跟踪采访。苏礼士区长还希望通过华美之声电台对广大侨胞和同胞们进行更好的沟通。华美之声电台也十分愉快地接受了苏礼士区长的邀请。现在我们就请听众朋友们收听这次采访节目的内容，谢谢大家。
Good afternoon, Mr. Alderman Solis. Welcome to Voice of Chinese Americans. We deeply appreciate for your taking your busy schedule today to speak to our audience. How are you, Mr. Alderman?
Well, good afternoon first, and thank you very much for the invitation. It is always a good opportunity to be able to communicate on the key issues of my neighborhoods to a broader audience, and this is a very good medium for that.
Thank you. My first question to you, Mr. Alderman, is that would you give a brief introduction of yourself and the 25th Ward? 我下面是问区长，让他介绍一下自己和这个25区的情况。
Well, I've been the alderman of the 25th Ward, which has always included Chinatown, for 20 years. March of this year was 20 years. Before that, I was a community organizer. The 25th Ward has changed in neighborhoods, but I've never given up Chinatown. Chinatown's been very good to me.
Thank you.
So the communities I represent, other than Chinatown, are Pilsen, which is primarily Latino, Mexican American. I now have a portion of the Little Italy, where the University of Illinois is. I have a portion of Abla Homes, which is primarily African American. And then I have 2 very up-and-coming neighborhoods in Chicago. The West Loop, roughly from Halsted to Racine, and from Washington to the Expressway. And now I have a very interesting neighborhood called the South Loop, which has the Chicago River east and west of it. And the reason I say it's a very interesting neighborhood for Chinatown, I think there's a potential for Chinatown to expand into that portion of my ward going north from Chinatown.
Fantastic. What is the total population, would you say, in your ward?
Well, when we draw up the ward, they should all be about the same number. Right now, the population of Chicago is just about 2.7 million. You have to divide up 50 wards into that. So it's supposed to be somewhere between 55 and 57,000, but obviously there's a lot of migration in and out. I would say that my ward right now is probably over 60,000.
And out of that 60,000, how much would you say for the Chinese immigrants in the community, just in the ward 25?
I would say about 10%, maybe a little bit more, but it's growing. Chinatown is and broader Chinatown is a community that is expanding. It's expanding southwest right now, but I think in the future it will expand north, west, and east.
I see. Mr. Alderman, I know that I think you won the most recent term last year in 2015.
2015 was my 7th election.
Congratulations. Since that term, what are a few of your most important agendas for the 25th Ward?
Well, I have an agenda for each one of my neighborhoods, and I think the portion that I mentioned in the South Loop is probably the one that has the most potential because it's the most raw area. Right now, it's a lot of empty land, especially on the east side of the river from Van Buren all the way down to the borders of Chinatown. And there are some developments that are going to happen that are both going to be residential, primarily residential on the east side of the river, roughly from the post office Van Buren down to Chinatown. And that development is going to be a combination of residential, office, and commercial. And that's going to bring a lot of life into this portion of my ward. But it's also going to change the face of Chicago. Right now, Chicago is known for the beautiful lake that we have, and that's the mayor likes to call it the front yard of Chicago. Well, his vision is to make the Chicago River the backyard of Chicago.
That's fantastic.
And
that runs through the center of Chinatown.
It runs right through the center of Chinatown. The whole river, if you follow it, basically intersects the whole of the 25th Ward, from north to south on the east side, and then from east to southwest, that begins in Chinatown and then finishes up on the western border. And so that development of the river, mostly residential but also industrial, is a big agenda for me. Chinatown, I think, can continue to grow, and I believe my goal is that Chinatown in Chicago becomes the top Chinese American community in the country. And I think there's been some statistics and studies that have shown that this Chinatown, unlike other Chinatowns in other cities of the U.S., is growing and toward that goal that I'd like to see.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Alderman, on that. Now, part of that, I would say it would be fair to contribute that to your great leadership in the community. But I think it is also true that I have been living in the city of Chicago for 30 years and in the community for 30 years. So I think it is also fair to say that in Chicago's Chinatown community, we have wonderful leadership.
Yes.
So
I would agree. You have great leadership in the business arena, in the social service arena, and in the key institutions in Chinatown. And it is one of the communities that I work so well with this leadership in a cooperative manner, as opposed to be in confrontation.
No.
We try to come up with solutions when there's some issues. And I think that's what makes Chinatown great. You don't see the problems in other neighborhoods in Chinatown. You do have crime, but serious problems like gangs and drugs, you don't see. There's a tremendous there are tremendous family values and work values and educational values that are in Chinatown that I think benefit a lot.
I would totally agree. My next question to you, Mr. Alderman, is I know that economic development is one of the important agendas in your jurisdiction. Now, with keeping that in mind, what would be a few things that you would like to say about the economic development or the economic vibrance, if you may, in our community?
Well, I think the key economic development strategy in Chinatown is the tourism and the related business that are connected with that, whether it's restaurants, whether it's shops, whether it's hotels. And because of the very strategic location that Chinatown has, just west of the lake, just south of downtown, and then the proximity of public transportation, like the Red Line, like the expressways, and the river, that Chinatown just stands to be successful, a winner in these types of goals. And I believe from the number of immigrants that have moved from all different classes, I see Chinese now that are very well off, that like to go shopping on Michigan Avenue.
Yes.
I see the sons and daughters of immigrants that came here when they were young, like myself, who are now wanting to come to Chinatown. I see seniors that very much are looking for housing in Chinatown. So everybody from the dishwasher in the restaurant to the very wealthy college student from wealthy families in China are wanting to be in Chinatown, and I think that's a very good omen.
Thank you. We have covered a few of the positive sides of our community. So in the following, given the time pressure, I want to shift the gears a little bit and discuss some of, if we may, some of the negative sides, if any, in the community. So my first question in that direction would be, as far as you know and as far as you see, is there any issue, whether a social, whether a racial thing that in our community, in the 25th Ward?
Well, in particular to Chinatown, I think the biggest issue that I would see that has sort of a criminal element to it, because of the safety here, because of the success of its commercial portion, because of the culture itself, I think sometimes this Chinatown community and some of its residents are seen as good targets by people that don't have good intentions. And some of those people are young, some of the people are older. It's also a place where people can come and catch a bus or park and go to the casinos. So that is, to some of the criminal element, that is like drawing a big target on you. We don't see the big problems that I mentioned earlier. We don't see the drug problem. We don't see the gang problems. But we do see people that like to assault people and rob them and go into the shops or the restaurants and try to steal. And that's why we've formed this neighborhood watch that I am very proud of. One of my staff is leading it. And we've also have started to work very closely with the police commander that has Chinatown as his responsibility, and also with the local Chinese media, which I think also is it's a benefit for Chinatown to have the media. Absolutely. But I think those are the big problems that we see. Also in the future, I see as the Chinese community grows, there may be a need for more affordable housing. But there's definitely a need right now for senior housing.
Okay.
And property values are going up.
Too much.
Too much, yeah. And part of the silver lining of having investment from China is also part of the problem is why property values go up, because when people with money come and pay whatever they need to pay, it raises the property values up.
Exactly. Now, out of the 60,000 population in the community in general, and about 10,000 of that in the Chinese community in particular, do we have any data? Do we have any statistics, or do you know if there is any number with respect to how many people live right around or even under the federal poverty line?
You know, I wouldn't be able to answer that, especially with Chinese, but that's something that I would be very interested in learning. Probably somebody like the Chinese American Service League, maybe Bernie Wong would have some rough numbers on that. The other thing I want to point out is that people believe that I have a big portion of the Chinese population, but I have 3 precincts, and most of those precincts are in the northeast portion of what I consider Greater Chinatown. The residential area is what's growing, and that population is going into the 11th Ward, the 12th Ward. I think when we do the development of the South Loop, and when some areas get opportunities that are on the eastern fringes of Pilsen, the Chinese population may grow into those areas too.
Do we have any significant portion of the African Americans in this ward?
The only significant portion of African Americans, they're not in my ward. You have African Americans to the east of here, but east of Clark Street is not my ward. Where I do have African Americans is almost in the center of my ward, around Roosevelt Road, just east of Ashland, and just west of Racine.
I see.
And south of Roosevelt. That's the Abla Homes area, public housing that I have, but it's not really connected, or it's not adjacent to the the Chinatown community that I represent.
So
on the east end there is, but that's not in my ward.
So it would be very fair to say that out of the 6 precincts, the primary, the substantial, more than a majority of the precincts would be heavily Hispanic.
Yes, but there's a phenomena, and I don't know if you can call it a phenomena, called gentrification that is used a lot.
That's a very important term and a concept.
In Pilsen, we do have gentrification, and by that, what that means is that people that are of a higher class, economic class, and usually of a different race, are becoming attractive to Pilsen. What's unique to Chinatown is that you have a higher economic class being attracted to Chinatown, but it's not necessarily of a different race. It's just Chinese.
That's right.
And that's something that many of the leaders in Pilsen, for example, many of the Mexican-American leaders in Pilsen are trying to figure out how they can do the same in Pilsen as to how gentrification in Chinatown is evolving, where it's more of the same people, just different classes coming in.
I totally understand you now, Mr. Alderman, and thank you for talking about one of the issues relating to the criminal side. Mm-hmm. Now, we all understand that the Chinatown Neighborhood Watch has been going on for quite some time. Mm-hmm. How did that get started? What is the role of the Alderman's office, your office, in promoting that? Would you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, and then here maybe Jackson might speak a little bit more on it because he's been the key person involved in it. We have had a number of incidents where innocent people have been assaulted, have been knocked down, have been hit, have been robbed, where we've had incidents where shops or restaurants have been robbed. And we had one very, very, very serious incident where a young woman was raped. And I think that's when we really sort of woke up and said, we've got to do something other than just talking to the police commander and asking for more police protection. And that's where Jackson came in. And at first, before I have Jackson talk, I just want to say he is a young man that was born and raised in this community. His network and his roots and his friends and his family are from this community. So he can really relate to the history and the people, even though he's a fairly young man. He can really relate well in this community. So he took it under his initiative, and he raised this idea of putting together a neighborhood watch. And at first I was a little bit concerned because it's very easy to go from a neighborhood watch to go to a vigilante. Yeah. And but he's mature enough to understand the difference, and he got a lot of people from his community, this neighborhood, to be part of it. And it goes way beyond his regular job. He works a regular 9-to-5 job in my office, but then he works sometimes till 2 or 3 in the morning with people from Chinatown. He has the full cooperation of the commander of the police department, and they have a lot of successes. So with that, maybe I can let Jackson speak a little bit on it.
Please.